Hi. I've been struggling with some pretty severe
Going right lately?
I don't know if it's just me. I imagine that we all have felt this phenomenon at some time. This is not, unfortunately, something that is an outlier of life at this point. We all feel a little bit of brain rot. I personally feel like I can barely have conversations with people when I'm suffering from some brain rot. I just need to step away from my phone. So unfortunately for you, or maybe fortunately for you, this is not going to be a very theatrical presentation. This is going to be a very stripped down conversation about books that I found made me feel smarter, books that I found really inspirational, people whose stories I found incredibly unique and important, and maybe just some fiction that I felt really challenged the idea of how a book could be presented. I think about these stories often, and I find when I have a story that really just kind of paralyzes me for a little bit, that is something that I will keep forever and be so excited to pass on that story to other people. So hopefully these books are inspirational for you if you are suffering from some brain rot. You're not alone. I'm not better than anybody. I also suffer from chronic phone addiction and just internet scum. The first book, and really the inspiration for this whole video, is A Philosophy of Walking by Frédéric Gros. Now, this is a philosophy book, which I usually don't consider myself to be intelligent enough to really consume and comprehend philosophy. Sorry, it's just something that I know about myself. Horrific trait, I know, I'm really not that intelligent. So whenever somebody mentions philosophy to me, I oftentimes kind of go, okay. But what is nice about this book is that it's written in very layman's terms. Kind of, I would say maybe even more, it's with the approach of just breaking it down into particulars and really diagnosing what every single person relates back to the idea of philosophy and walking tied together. So basically, Gross examines different philosophers, different writers, different inspirational people. You have Gandhi, you have Nietzsche, you have Thoreau, and they all had these very particular relationships to walking, whether or not it was just to curate a routine, utilize this time outside, forming these habits that would ultimately elevate their teachings and their writings. It also goes into the idea of pilgrimages, the idea of how walking can group people together and how we can be pushed towards a specific destination. It's really just this interesting text about how important and integral, not even just walking, let's not even just pinpoint it to walking. I think just the idea of being outside, cultivating a relationship with nature, and how inspirational that can be for the mind, body, and soul. This is great for me because I love walking. Truly, ask me what my hobbies are. I will say reading, entertaining, puzzling in the wintertime, and walking. I walk every single day. I'm very fortunate that I'm able to go out and walk. I need to be outside. I think that this relates to the idea of brain rot and separating ourselves from technology with the idea that we really do need to go out and touch grass. Baby, go outside and touch grass. Go outside and touch grass. It helps you so much. When I'm suffering from brain rot, I just need to remember that I gotta go outside. I gotta feel the sunshine. I need to open a window and let that sun in. This is not going to be for everybody. Again, it is a philosophy text, so you do have to remember a lot of it is very heightened ideas. But I think if you are interested in philosophers, maybe routines, setting up routines, this has a lot of charm to it, and I think it's a very useful book, and it sticks with me. I think about it often, and I see it in bookstores, and I wonder, why did I get rid of that? I would love to revisit that, and unfortunately, I don't have it. So, The Observable Universe by Heather McAulden. This book, really, the first time I read it last year, I believe, and I really wasn't inspired when I first started reading it. It felt like it wanted to be something different than what it was, but once I picked it back up, which is about halfway through the year, I really enjoyed the experience that I had with it. This is basically like a fragmentary memoir from McAulden, who is a multidisciplinary artist, and that comes through in her writing. Both of McAulden's parents passed away from AIDS, and she had no real relationship with them. She is left to kind of try to patch together the story of her parents through the internet and through the stigma and through worlds that are kind of concealed. A lot of that time, I feel like in the 80s and 90s with the AIDS epidemic, a lot of people weren't really disclosing it or talking about it. And she's trying to piece together a history that seems like it does not want to be pieced back together. This I found really interesting because it's not only tying together her stories, but it's tying together the idea of virality, which is basically how scary AIDS would become because of how viral and how frequently people were becoming diagnosed with it, how scary it was. That is what made AIDS such a complicated illness when it first came around. But she's tying it back into internet culture and just how viral things have become, how that word has kind of permeated our subconscious and how we've become obsessed with virality. I found myself looking up so many different niche references that she was making. She has a lot of subjects in here that she talks about, a lot of viral moments, a lot of viral videos, and a lot of kind of staggering introductions of technology that made the viral world exist. I think that this has merit to it. I think it has value to it. I think the parts where it became really memoir-y, I didn't really love as much, but I think when she was just enriching herself in that thesis about virality and how we have accepted that in day-to-day life now has a really interesting take. And I thought that this was good. It made me feel a little bit smarter, you know. If anything, it made me feel kind of cool for carrying this around, which, sorry, I have to disclose that. And then I have a really interesting little book that I don't think I talk about enough, but it really enjoyed my experience when I read this, and that is Joan of Arc in her own words. This was transcribed by, I think, William Trask, or Task is his last name. And essentially what this is a reframing of Joan of Arc's story through the transcripts of her trial, which she, if you don't know, she was eventually sentenced to death. Joan of Arc, what a pillar of history, what a pillar of women's history. I think oftentimes we think of all of these kind of archaic historical texts and maybe we're turned off from them, but I think that this is a great way of accessing information from history. This is a sliver of a book. If anything, this is just a really interesting book to read. It's the transcript of her trial. I mean, you want to, if we're interested in true crime now, which is again is a huge online space, I also partake in it. I'm guilty as charged. I don't know. That's all I can impart on that for you, unfortunately. It's just good. Pick it up. It's small. You can read it in a day, and I think it's inspiring. And then for fiction, there were two books that inspired me to make this video. The first of which was A Philosophy of Walking, and the second was actually this book. When I first thought about a book that made me really just seep into the world that the author was describing, it's Hurricane Season by Fernanda Melchor. This is a dark book, a very, very dark book. I've talked about this when talking about disturbing books on this channel, but I do think that there's a lot of merit in the way that this book is written, and I am constantly remembering the world that I was in, that I inhabited. This is all about a small Mexican town where a witch is found dead. Right in the first couple of pages, you are introduced to this witch. The story is told through the different perspectives of people who came to know, who came to hang out with, and who came to really not want to be associated with, but had a story connected to the witch. This is a great analysis on violence, on ostracizing people, ostracization. Yeah, I think that's the word. Which again is, if we're talking about people on the internet, I think that this is a great way to really meditate on how violent and horrific that people can be. This book, the way that it was written, and I've read other books by Melchor, specifically This Is Not Miami, which I think was a great short story collection, but not my favorite by Melchor. I think that Hurricane Season is such a strong feat of storytelling. You feel every single emotion in this book. Really, nothing else. An AI SLOP would never be able to tell you this story. I feel like this had a really huge impact on the Bookstagram, BookTube, BookTok for a while, and I don't see as many people talking about it. Maybe it's because it's a couple years old, but this is such a worthy read and such profound writing. Also, kudos to the translator, because I feel like they translated it so well. This was obviously first written in Spanish, but oh my God, what a impactful story. Just talking about the worst parts of people. Funny thing is, I had no idea what happened to my copy. And I ran into a guy at a bar who used to live at one of my friends' houses, follow me here. And this is when I was drinking. Apparently, I gave this book to him, and I don't remember it. But I saw him after years of not seeing him, and he came up to me and he said, "Oh, I still have your book, by the way." And I said, "What? What book?" And he goes, Hurricane. I said, "You have hurricane season? I've been wondering what happened to that book." And he had it. He goes, "Do you want it back?" I said, No, please. It's all yours. Enjoy it. But I'm happy that that case is closed. And I finally knew what happened to that book because it was driving me crazy. And then after that, I have Slouching Towards Bethlehem by Joan Didion. I had read this a while ago. I didn't really remember it. And then I reread it this year. And this sent me into a spiral. I don't know why. Actually, I do know why. I know why it sent me into a spiral. I felt such nostalgia for a life that I've never lived. I felt nostalgia for a time that people were leaving messages to one another, calling on the phone, assembling at a designated spot without worrying that if their friend wasn't going to show up, they'd be embarrassed to go there alone. I don't know. I felt like I should have lived in this time. I know so many people say, oh, I wish I lived back then. You just knew that everybody had such an individual way of thinking. Not to say that that's not happening now by any means. I think you know what I'm saying. I just feel like there was a time that there was so much excitement and so much, I don't know, birthing of ideas. And do I feel that now? Yeah, I do, definitely. I think social media is used for great things, but I don't know. This just made me feel something that I hadn't felt in a long time. It feels like you can pick this up at any time in your life and relate to at least one of the people that she talks about here. And I loved it, and it really inspired me, but also left me feeling so sad, which I think is good. We have to run through those emotions in our life. Loved this. After that, I want to talk about the book Hunger by Knut Hamsun. Ooh, I guess you would consider this probably a Norwegian classic. This was written in the 1800s, I believe. This feels very pertinent to now. It feels like it could be written as a contemporary novel. Meditations on loneliness, meditations on hunger for something. Quite literally, physically, the character is experiencing hunger, living well below the poverty line, trying to just get money to get his next meal. But really where this excels is it's talking about the psychological defeat when you are fighting an uphill battle against not only society but yourself. This feels like being trapped. It does feel a little bit suffocating. The character does have a lot of charisma, and you are able to experience this otherwise incredibly sad and unfortunate situation in a weirdly like half optimistic way. But this feels like when I am trapped in a brain sloppy world. This feels like my body is hungering for something much more inspiring, for intellectual conversations, for just walking outside and again touching grass. A very psychological torture chamber that you're being run through, and that is exactly what I feel like when I spend way too much time on my phone or on the computer staring at blue light. Obviously not about technology. I mean, this was written way before, but a lot of those emotions can be parallel to what I think a lot of people are experiencing now, being on the internet and just rotting, and trying to explain a way to get out of it. And yeah, this definitely feels like if you want to experience brain rot and you want to repel it, read this book. And then we have one of my favorite books of all time, and a book that really grounded me and put everything into perspective, and that is Cockroaches by Scholastic Mukasanga. I think I want to reread this year. This book really significantly changed something in me, all about Mukasanga's own experience having family members die and some survive during the Rwandan genocide, which was happening between the Tutsis and the Hutus in 1994 Rwanda. About 100 days, they say around like 800,000 to 1 million people were murdered, which is unbelievable when you really break down the statistics of that. There's so many different videos online that you can see from survivors' perspectives and how they were able to survive. This was one of the most moving portrayals of human resilience I've ever read. I can't tell you how much this just really puts everything into perspective for me. The Solace of Open Spaces. This is a very short, little tiny book that reaffirms going outside, being alone, and understanding that your thoughts are what move you, what motivate you, and ultimately are you. This is about a woman. This is a memoir. It's like a collection of essays, but about a woman who was living in, I think, Los Angeles, working in the entertainment industry, and then just relocates her entire life and essentially her identity to living in Wyoming. One of my favorite facts about Wyoming is that it is the least populated state within the United States, which is crazy considering its size. It's huge. You would think that Vermont, Rhode Island, Delaware, all these smaller states would get that prize, but Vermont is the second least populated. Wyoming is the least populated. So you really understand the magnitude of solitude that the author is feeling. Wish that I didn't get rid of this. I did get rid of this book. I thought I had kept it when I made this list, but this also, I'm somebody who is so connected to nature. My dream is to walk the Appalachian Trail. I love being alone. I grew up in a small town of 3,000 people, so the idea of being alone is something that I'm very familiar with. I think that this just shows you that you can be successful being alone. Like a lot of the time we spend scrolling because we're afraid of spending time alone. I think I'm also a victim to that. I'm speaking from personal experience. While I do enjoy being alone, I do spend a lot of the time, the downtime that I have, even as opposed to reading, I spend a lot of that downtime being online, just watching stupid things, filling my brain with information that is just so inconsequential to the main point. I think that this is a good book to just kind of clear your brain and show you that you can, especially as a woman, pack up and move and be by yourself. The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. I think this is probably, I would say, like one of the more popular books on this list. I think a lot of people have come to just really understand and respect this book from James Baldwin. I read this for my book club last year. I think this was actually a really successful nonfiction book to read in a book club. There's just so many conversations to be had about this. I'm always a little apprehensive to do a nonfiction book in my book club. Sometimes they can be really boring. Nonfiction is not for everybody, but James Baldwin is probably most known for being a fiction writer. You have Giovanni's Room, you have If Beale Street Could Talk, both books I haven't read. This was my first Baldwin, and it was a nonfiction, and I'm always a little bit nervous to read a nonfiction book by an otherwise well-known fiction writer, but this was so effective in the way that he portrayed his opinions and ideas and information. This is broken down into two little essays, I guess you could say, the first of which being a letter to his nephew, I believe, on the anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation, which was passed in 1863, so it was written in 1963. It's telling him about what life would be like as an American during the time of like civil rights. This second part of which is breaking down his own experience as a Black man in the United States, his relationship to religion and what he thinks the role that has been kind of imposed on him in this world. I remember reading this at my grandmother's house, just on the couch while my grandmother, my aunt, and my brother were watching a TV show, and I just was able to tune out that TV show and just really collapse into these words. Such a great writer, and I've talked about this before on the channel, but I think that there is a case for brevity. I love a long book. I really, really do. I literally just made a video about long books that I love. But I think if you are able to capture and pin down your argument in such a brief and digestible way, there's such a power in that. And you don't even have to say that much about these topics. It should be ingrained in the human consciousness to respect one another. Unfortunately, that's not the world that we live in, but this is just such a great and persuasive way. You literally can't refute what he's saying because it's such a great experience of reading this. Really just, wow, had moments of just kind of stopping and looking up and being like, wow, that's a wonderful sentence. And after that is a book that I thought I had on my bookshelf, but apparently I don't. That is 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Very famous book, huge classic, one of my favorite books, and I always feel like I never talk about it enough, and maybe it's worth a revisit. This book I'm putting on here because I really think it forces you to use your imagination. Obviously, if you don't know what this book is about, it's about this family in this particular town and just their life. They're moving through of life, particular chapters in their lives, war, nature, solitude. Obviously, it's right in the title. Tying it back into the solace of open spaces, really just the individual as an important person, just without technology, without anything else, just us as humans are so important and integral to nature and movement within life. The world that you are in this book, very similar to hurricane season, it's so vivid. It really makes you create your own storyboard. Everybody, I imagine, is going to have an individual experience when reading this, though everything is written very vividly and you are able to capture that world. Every single person that reads this, because it is so vastly magical, you are going to create something that is so your own. You're going to be able to create these characters. There's this moment where there's this widespread insomnia, and I still remember imagining every single person like running from home to home and just being widely awake. It might feel a little bit exhaustive going through this, but at the same time, it's so rewarding because you've had this moment to yourself and you've done it, and now you have this painted canvas that is created by these words that Marquez is writing, but you yourself have made that book have a life of its own. And I think that that is so important when reading something, really just capturing the essence of a world that somebody's presenting to you and just making it your own. At least that's the relationship that I have to this book. And the last book, hopefully you're not too exhausted. Hopefully these have been inspiring for you. The last one that I want to talk about is The Passion According to G.H. by Clarice Lispector. I've obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but I've talked about on this channel before not loving stream of consciousness. I think sometimes if it's done really badly, it's probably the worst thing you'll ever read in your entire life. But this, I think, is one of the best representations of stream of consciousness. This is about a kind of upper class woman who basically has a mental breakdown after she steps on and kills a cockroach. As a New York City girl, I feel you. But what this does so well is it just transports the reader into the depths of this character's mind while also being incredibly reflective of our own mind, our own mental landscape. You start to really relate to the spiral. It's not even a spiral sometimes. Sometimes it's just like this very expansive approach to scenarios and these little sections of our brain that we all can kind of itch and tickle because we do empathize with the main character. I mean, I do, at least in certain points of this. I remember thinking, oh yeah, I feel that way too. Wow, okay, I feel that way. What a great way of putting that onto the page. It really just sticks into the individual, our relationship to the world, how we move about, and I can't imagine a better way to just cap this all off than just understanding that we ourselves are so important, and I'm maybe just saying this to really affirm it within myself, but there's so many important ways that we can use our mind and we can communicate with people, and I just need to understand that my mind is so useful, and just even having this open conversation is important for me. I need to get out of that brain rot world and utilize my brain in a way that is constructive. If you are suffering from some brain rot, you're not alone. Welcome to the world, unfortunately. Anyway, let me know what books you found inspired you, really instigated your mind, and put you in a direction that you felt was fruitful and advancing. I would love to know. Really, just yeah, I want to hear it. I want to hear what you think was an important read. It's good to know. Anyway, you guys are wonderful. You're fabulous. Thank you so much for being here. I will see you in the next one.